Alex Honnold is the most famous climber ever. While Honnold has certainly earned his fame with his death-defying climbs, the path he took to get here was random and almost accidental. This is the origin story of Alex Honnold, which starts with a near-death fall that caused him to take up soloing in the first place, includes a climb so difficult that people thought it was a prank, and ends with a route that was sketchy enough to make him swear off free soloing forever. Hey, I'm Marcus, and this is Climbing Explained. I've always been surprised at where Alex Honnold came from. If you didn't know the story of his early days, you would probably assume that he grew up crack climbing. He just looks so comfortable and in control on long, granite routes. What's weird is that actually couldn't be farther from the truth. For the first 19 years of his life, Alex Honnold was a gym kid. He climbed almost exclusively indoors and even went to some competitions, making the US youth national team at 18 years old. Even in these early teen years, though, there was evidence of the climber that Honnold would become. He would go to the climbing gym alone, put his headphones in, and do laps on the bouldering wall for hours on end, traversing back and forth, building up the technique and slow endurance that he would eventually become world famous for. After high school, Honnold went to college and spent what he describes as a miserable year living by himself, not making any friends, and barely talking to anyone. Aside from trips to the climbing gym and nearby Indian Creek, he basically never left the house. In 2002, his life changed in a major way. After his father passed away, Honnold dropped out of college and spent a year basically directionless. Socializing little, going for long walks in the mountains, not really knowing what he was going to do with his life. And then, in 2004, an accident happened and kicked off a series of events that would eventually vault Honnold into rock climbing fame. The day started out innocently enough. On December 27th, 2004, Alex Honnold packed his bag for a hike, tucked his cell phone into his pocket, and went off on a solo attempt of Mount Talek. Near the summit of the mountain, he found himself snowshoeing on steep, wind-hardened ice without any crampons to help him break through. Intimidated, uncomfortable, and without any ice tools, he hesitated for a moment, tried to downclimb, and then he lost his balance and pitched 400 feet down the mountain. It's ironic that a fall that nearly killed Honnold would end up being such an important moment in his life. His injuries were severe. A broken hand, broken ribs, multiple cuts, and a punctured sinus. He was airlifted out and hospitalized. His recovery was long and somewhat tenuous, and he couldn't climb hard, but that sort of turned out to be a blessing in disguise. That same spring, Honnold bought a van and headed down to Joshua Tree, still hurting from his injuries but needing to get out on the rock, and this is where the legend of Alex Honnold really began. It was those early days in Joshua Tree where Honnold first took up free soloing. He couldn't push grades and he didn't have a consistent partner, so his solution was to rack up a long tick sheet of solos in the 5.3 to 5.6 range, going for volume over difficulty. As he healed, he began upping the ante. Cracks, multi-pitches, solos in the 5.10 and ups. He soon realized that while he wasn't the strongest climber, he had a particular ability to stay calm in scary situations, and that made him great at soloing. He fell in love with the simplicity and solitude that it brought. Now, at this time, Honnold was still basically a climbing bum. Unknown, unsponsored, sleeping on his crash pad, but it only took him 3 years to go from soloing a 5.6 slab to, oh my god, who is this kid? It started in September of 2007. Wanting to push his limits, Honnold took his newfound soloing talents to Yosemite Valley, where he repeated one of the most iconic solos ever, Peter Croft's link-up of Astroman and Rostrum, 3,000 feet of free soloing up to 5.11. True to his nickname, Alex No Big Deal Honnold did this so quietly that I can barely find any more information on it. This was one of the most impressive solos ever, and in a climbing.com article, Honnold says that he wouldn't even call it an achievement. As someone who would consider it a lifetime achievement to even climb Astroman with a rope, I can't help but take this as a personal insult. The Yosemite link-up gained Honnold a little recognition within the hardman community of the valley, but that was it. 6 months later, though, he did something that no one even thought was possible. In the world of sandstone climbing, Moonlight Buttress stands head and shoulders above every other route in the world. 12,000 feet of splitter finger crack, slightly overhung and clocking in at 512D, it's one of the most iconic climbs on the planet. In 2008, no one had ever soloed anything with that combination of length and difficulty. No one had really thought to try. Honnold first visited the route in 2004, on-siting every pitch. Soon, the idea of free soloing began to nag at him, and in 2008 he rehearsed the route 4 times, using a static line and a mini traction to dial in the moves on top rope. Then, in the early hours of April 1st, 2008, Alex Honnold left his van, plugged in his headphones, and climbed the entire route in less than an hour and a half. Speaking about it after, Honnold once again played it off as if it was nothing. The moves felt comfortable, the pump wasn't an issue, and the exposure on the top pitches was everything he hoped for, but this was one of the biggest news stories of the decade. When word of this ascent first got out, the climbing world was shocked. People thought that it was an April Fool's joke. That's how far above the standard it was when Honnold soloed it. Immediately, he became something of an enigma, this quiet, shy kid who apparently didn't feel any fear. His dry humor and aversion to the spotlight made people feel like they wanted to know more about him. Despite how big of a deal this was to everyone else, Moonlight Buttress was well within Honnold's comfort level. Additionally, while he didn't regret having the opportunity to dial the moves in on top rope, Alex felt that there was something missing. Inspired by old stories of on-site solos and wanting to up the ante, not just in terms of scale, but also in terms of form, a new idea began to form in Alex Honnold's mind, one that would push him as close as he's ever been to the edge. The regular northwest face of Half Dome is one of the most iconic routes in rock climbing history. First ascended by Royal Robbins in 1957, it was the first grade 6 route in North America, and it represented a massive leap forwards in the world of Yosemite climbing. In 1976, Art Higbee and Jim Erickson put a heroic effort into free climbing the entirety of the route. Although they are widely credited with the first ascent, they never actually did the entire climb free. The upper 512 slabs forced them to aid about 100 feet. It was this same 100 feet that would bring Honnold one move away from a 2,000-foot fall. On September 6, 2008, after only having free climbed the route once and not really having explored all the variations, Alex Honnold set off to free solo Half Dome. He intentionally didn't dial in the beta as much as he could have. He wanted to keep it sporting. Although graded lower than Moonlight Buttress, Honnold describes Half Dome as much harder due to some route finding mistakes, insecure climbing, and the sheer exposure that he faced. At one point, he decided to take a variation pitch that he'd never climbed before and found himself lost in a sea of granite with no idea where to go and no clue where he was supposed to pick up the regular route. After on-sighting his way through some 510 terrain and down climbing a chimney, he was back on track, but the worst was yet to come. Finally, after 2.5 hours of climbing, Honnold came to the last slab pitch. This pitch, which had turned away Higbee and Erickson, is rated 511+, but features a distinct crux, with climbers needing to commit all their weight to a high right foot. Because this is Yosemite, the quote-unquote foothold is more like a smooth dish the size of a nickel. With one pitch left, Honnold breezed through the lower sections of the slab, reached this crux, and froze. There, 2,000 feet above the ground, he found himself stuck. A jug hung tantalizingly out of reach. Between him and safety, though, was the crux move, requiring him to trust all his weight and his life on a tiny ripple in the rock. No hope of down climbing, no workaround beta, no option but to go up. Honnold waited until his calves almost gave out and then finally fired the move, arriving safely at the top. Although he had free soloed the entirety of Half Dome, he was unsatisfied with his performance, saying that he felt like he'd gotten away with something. He went so far as to swear off free soloing for good, although we can all see how well he stuck by that promise. Although it wasn't the perfect day he had been hoping for, the Half Dome free solo broke the climbing world, vaulting Alex Honnold into the type of fame that we had never seen and might never see again, and, well, I think you know the rest of the story from here.
Enjoyed that video? I bet you love this one. Go on, click it.